The way we designed this series is that always before the talk, we had a group of people who got together debating a subject that was the subject of the day. So I'm going to call those who participated in the discussion group today to help me out to get the discussion going. That's quick.
I have sort of, it's a question, but also a sort of enhancement of your arguments, because we were discussing this other knowledge production, and because you're at the beginning, first of all, thank you very much for your wonderful reading/rereading of the 1995 piece. But at the beginning you spoke about these 4 points: the object, the author, the audience, and let's call the fourth part the context in which it's been presented. But isn't the shift from in the work of Duchamp just actually about a state of in-betweenness? In between the author and the artwork, in between the audience and the author, in between. Because you are making the same shift from the monologue, the Cartesian monologue of looking at the world from a subject opposite an object into a dialogue. The notion of infra-French in Duchamp, which is the undecidable moment between the subject and the object. And also when he came for the first time in 1915 in New York, he said, the object started talking to me. So my question is, as an enhancement of what you spoke about, isn't that perhaps what we recognize now as a kind of knowledge? It's speaking from this in-betweenness, this interest, which actually, going to the Latin roots, means interesse, being in between. That's my question. Is that a knowledge? Is that perhaps the knowledge we're speaking about now? Or that's quite a touch.
Thanks for interesse, in between. That's very nice.
Means
interest, yes,
yeah.
I agree. I hadn't thought of that, but yeah, clearly interest comes from interesse.
Yeah.
To be in between, yeah. Well, the answer is yes. I agree with you. The thing to come back with the so-called knowledge that I got out of Duchamp's ready-mades is that the notions of object, author, audience and institution were stripped bare to the mere minimum. What Duchamp has done is perform a sort of test that takes all causal effect, cause-effect link away. For example, usually you say, well, a work of art is an object, and it is a work of art if the object has been made by the artist, and then well made, and so on, blah, 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 and all the aesthetic criteria that you can have. And it's not made by the artist with Duchamp, it's ready-made. Then the next thing, works of art are signed by the author, and authorship is that thing that we call, this instance that is responsible for a work. Well, if you look at the poster Wanted, we are looking for the author. The criminal is not found, and he has many pseudonyms, starting with R. Butt, and Rose C'est la vie, and then others, and others. And so the same thing, if you look at in the condition of there has to be an audience, there has to be a public, well, but the public is blind. It starts with The Blind Man, being that little magazine. The urinal has never been seen by the public. And when Duchamp really comes back to painting again in 1919, he sticks a brush that to clean bottles out of the painting so that you get it in the eye. Se rincer l'œil, on dit en français. Se rincer l'œil, rincer la bouteille, se rincer l'œil. So it plays on that, and so on and so on. So that in fact you get a certain knowledge of the infra-thin kind, yes, of the in-between kind, absolutely. And that's correct. Yeah, I agree with you. Thank you for your comment.
Thank you for this talk. You ask, you suppose you are different from the artist, and your contact with the artwork is described as, it is suggested as a lovemaking. It is exciting in lovemaking to think the other is different. This is part of the excitement in lovemaking. I wonder if this is now at stake here as well, that it is maybe more interesting to fantasize the artwork as something other than what you are doing, and having the lovemaking being excited by that art, because it's not the same. The same, it would be, you would know it. It's less exciting. You're looking for that which you don't know. I want to say to you as an artist here that what you describe, it does describe very well my own practice. But is not with the theoretician, but is with my work. Is also, you say very beautifully, I'm attracted to what I don't know. When I make a new work, there's something to discover. It's crucial that I don't know it. That's the desire which make the discovery. And indeed, it's not translatable. That's true. There is no congruence with that. It's a creation. It's not, you cannot translate. You have to create it again. That's what you do for me, also in your text. So if your text excites me, is a creation. Make I myself clear? I don't know.
Well, thank you very much. It's very, very kind of you. I cannot come. Yes, thank you. That's it sort of dovetails with the Rosalind Krauss remark. Thierry, you're like an artist. Yeah, and true. Perhaps I do give aesthetic experience a much more important role in art criticism than my very theoretically inclined friends like Rosalind Krauss and other people from October magazine and things like that, to whom I very often associated them. I remember, for example, I will tell you this is not very nice for a colleague, but I have to say it. It's Rosalind wrote back in the early 80s, I think. She wrote two pieces. She wrote the same piece twice. Once, probably if you are familiar with the literature, you know the piece. It's called Sculpture in the Expanded Field, with a famous dialogue, very interesting piece. And there are a number of artists who are called in to build the theory. The same text exists as a work on John Mason. You know John Mason? Well, you don't know John Mason. That's the problem. I didn't know John Mason either. And he's a California sculptor who does a clay sculpture, and whom I'm sure I would find derivative, not a great artist. I'm sure Rosalind Krauss found him derivative as well. I know it because I discussed it with her. And why? But she said, well, she published it nevertheless as if the theory had come. She could to keep the love-making metaphor going. She could not make love to that work of John Mason, but she used it to illustrate. For other reasons, like, I don't know, she might have been paid very well for that article, for example, because it was lavishly. I mean, we all have, because Rosalind is really a friend, I'm sorry to have brought that up. I'm sure there are cases, I myself acknowledged that I did the same thing once, that I got the wrong artist to find the right things maybe. So this is what you, yeah, this is the inequality in the relationship. You spoke of otherness. It's not just otherness, it's also equality. You don't want to abuse. You want to rape the work, to keep the metaphor going. You don't want to be abused by the work or crushed by the work either. You have to, so there is a certain, it's a struggle. You have to be of equal force. Don't you think so?
Yes, I absolutely agree. No way. But at the same time, it's exciting if you look for your design, if you look that you get satisfied.
Can you speak a little louder?
Yes, I agree, no way.
Yeah.
I agree. At the same time, it's exciting. Yeah, I agree. At the same time, it's exciting to look for one's own satisfaction. So it's not only equality, it's equality. It's very tender and kind, but more deeply describing that contact is exciting if you look for your satisfaction, also for the other. This is it. This is the excitement.
Are you talking about lovemaking or art making?
No. I really mean what I experience in my work.
Yes, okay.
I mean my work. But what I feel I was maybe not making myself very clear is that in this contact, it is easier to think it is something else or someone else, something essentially different, like you said, the theory, you are a theoretician, and this is the art. And that's the tension, that difference between these two. But I wonder if this is just a construction, that they are different, yes, in the way they are placed, in the way we need to place them to feel that magnetism. But maybe it is in essence the same. Like, I have to think very much of a work where I talk to the water. I have to think about this, because I was talking to the water, and it's like the same. I know I talk to myself, but still, at one point, I feel the water answers, or the water finds an own word.
The work answers.
Yeah, the work answers. But maybe it's just a construction, but I don't mind, as long as it works. Maybe it's just a bridging. I'm not speaking about the truth, but I'm aware that maybe it's just a construction. Maybe it's just a construction that you think the art is something different. As long as it works, it's good.
Well, the art is certainly something different as far as I'm concerned. The equivalent to your art production would be my text, for me. Now, may I elaborate on this, and you will tell me if you agree. Now, this has nothing to do with the with the practice of criticism anymore. I want to talk about art practice. I think that you can almost say this is a good rule. Well, yeah. That artists tend to want to communicate with the audience via the work. Good artists speak to the work. engage in a dialogue with the work, and when the work is finished, abandon it to the audience. So that, let's talk painting because it's easier than talking contemporary practices, which are sometimes difficult to decode. But let's talk traditional painting. The academic artist of the 19th century is going to always have in mind the other, but the other is the audience that he wants to please. So it's as if the artist is in the studio with a crowd of people behind his back watching him, and he wants to please the audience. So he's going to try to produce a certain effect on the audience. So each brushstroke is aimed at producing a certain effect on it. The good artists, so that would be Bouguereau, for example, or Cabanel, or such mediocre academic artists of the 19th century. You take Manet, for example, he's very much aware that the audience is there watching him paint also, because he also paints for the salon. But he doesn't bother. The canvas, the model, the answer comes from the canvas. That's where it's at. And then the last brush stroke is the moment when the artist says, okay, now you're on your own, and abandons the work, and it's up to the work to then say, to then capture the attention of the audience. But as long as you are busy working as an artist, I think if you're a real good artist, then you don't think of the audience at that moment. So that is to address the otherness, and you said it yourself, that you talk to the work, not to the public for whom the work is made. That is a great, and I think that's a definition of modernism. You know, I believe that when the addressee of the work becomes the medium, that is a little very simple definition of modernism.
But,
whether we are postmodern or not is a question. Yes?
But wasn't that the case a bit with Duchamp, that you described the situation? That isn't that the case with Duchamp, that he incorporates the idea of the reception of the public is very important in his work. So I think he's all the time looking over his shoulder while making his art.
Yes, Duchamp's more perverse than Manet.
Yeah, of course, but more interesting.
Yeah, Duchamp, it's like, with Duchamp, this might be a definition of postmodernism, but I don't like these post blah 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 things. But it might be like there is another reflexive twist there. Because Duchamp makes art about art. Really, this is it's so obvious that he makes art that is also a comment on art. Something that is very much still with us, and that some artists try desperately to get out of, because we have now reached a point of self-referentiality that has become utterly boring most of the time, in my opinion.
I know there are a couple of questions waiting. I want to just expand on this one really quickly, because throughout your talk you spoke of object, and each time you used the term object, I was trying to translate it to contemporary practices. They are probably far more ephemeral, much more process-oriented. And I would want to ask you, if you replace the word object from your paper, would that in any way have consequences for your conclusions regarding knowledge production, or not necessarily?
Well, I would tend not to replace the word object, because a performance, something that is performance that deploys itself in time, is also an object. You can speak of a musical object. It's an acoustic object. It doesn't need to be visual or tactile for all that. Now, process-oriented, it's the same. Once the process is gone, what remains of the art? It's a question that we all know from...
You have the theories. I return the question to you.
Well, there is an object. There is always an object. That object may be the trace of the performance. If it's you take Fluxus artists, for example, if you're not there when it happens, you have missed it a lot. And then you
It doesn't reside in place, in space. It seems to reside in time.
It resides in time, but still, if I didn't have an information about George Maciunas doing this and that at some concert in Düsseldorf in some year, I wouldn't know about it. So these things are objects also. But then you have to reconstitute the aesthetical. I don't say that the trace, you know, let's say the invitation card to the event is the work. You have to work from there to reconstitute the process. I don't make the difference between process and object. I really don't think it's a relevant. For example, in the famous dispute between Rosenberg and Greenberg, I would probably side up with Greenberg. Rosenberg said with abstract expressionism, it's the action that counts, not the thing. But if that was true, we wouldn't be looking at Pollock now. And it's obvious that it is the object that's there that testifies to the quality of the action. You can make a fake Pollock. It will show that it's not the same thing. So the object is testifying to the process. I really think so. Now I don't find the equivalence. You should tell me an example of which you think that this doesn't apply in contemporary practice.
Well, I think that the reconstruction of that object, the performance, is more or less a kind of assembled ready-made instead of an object as the classical artwork, where you can still refer to, and also in terms of theory.
Yeah.
So I think there is a difference. There is a difference.
But
you need the notion of the action to look upon Pollock. You make this assemblage.
Yeah, you always make that assemblage, even with traditional art.
Yeah, but in a different way.
I was in London 2 days ago. I saw 3 days ago. I saw lots of exhibitions, old art, modern art. I saw contemporary stuff. I saw a show curated by Damien Hirst. I saw the Fischli and Weiss show, and then I also saw Holbein and Velázquez, and Hockney, for example. Well, Hockney is a contemporary artist, as far as I know, and he draws, and Holbein draws, and in both I could feel the hand. I could reconstitute the movement of the hand by looking at the drawing. Is that so different from? Now, in Fischli and Weiss, when they carve polyurethane fake ready-mades, they make it a point that you don't see the hand, of course. But that's very much part of the charm of those objects too. I mean, you still have to look at the object and being, and looking at, oh gosh, how did they do it? Because I do for the fake ready-made, and I cannot help but seeing that I've been, and so on and so on.
Shall we take another question?
Sure, as many as you.
You seem to sketch a theoretical danger coming from lending the object too much agency. The object speaks back, the object looks back, and I think I would invite you to say a little bit more there. And I think that part of part of that danger comes to the fact that this agencies actually relates to the social pact. You write about social pacts which place the object there and invest it with the truth of being an artwork, which is different from its being an object. And there is something else in this object which actually addresses your desire, or you have a desire to understand it or to see it, which is completely inappropriable. And I mean, for me, the true moment of criticism or thinking about artwork lies precisely in the resonance of that desire with the inappropriability of the object. But I am aware that this is my own desire in a sense, and it will never be the object's desire for me. So this kind of reciprocity for me, it doesn't hold. And agency means also, lending too much agency means that object, you make the object the inclination of that power which you want to erase from yourself. You know, it's a shifting of responsibility in a sense. So if you could say more about that, perhaps.
That's complicated. I'm not sure. I'm not sure I understood exactly what you mean with agency. Or did I lend too much agency to the object?
No, not you, but in any discourse which states that the object looks back or the object speaks back, and curiously enough, it is the word object which appears in those formulations and not the word artwork or piece.
Oh, because I never forget that artworks are objects. That is, I worked too long on Duchamp, which means that I never assume that a work of art is a work of art until I have judged that it is a work of art. This is the way I think. It's my way to resist institutional aesthetics or institutional theories of art. Something is in a gallery, that doesn't prove it's art. So, first of all, it's a thing. By object, I mean a thing. And it's a thing, you know. Whether it's the trace of a process or something else, but we deal with things. I mean, okay, what did I see today? I saw the Arnold Mick show. There are two things there. I mean, a video projection is a thing. It's a technology, it's a material, it has a physical existence. So I'm looking at the images, moving images, knowing very well that the medium is video and so on, and then I can look at the content. But all these things, I look at the medium, I look at the thing. So that's what I mean. And agency, yes, agency, of course, they do things to you, those images. Of course. But because it's the artist that did it to them in the first place. But I never assume that something is a work of art a priori, which is why I go back to the thing-like thing instead of speaking of work. But most of the time, they are works of art, of course. I mean, I don't deny. It's more like an automatic attitude of mine to suspend. And also a way of telling people, don't be intimidated. If you don't like something, if you really think it's shit, then it's shit. It's not art. Say it.
Can still be bad art, right?
Some things are not art at all. The art world is full of things that I think are not art at all.
Yeah, I wanted to bring back maybe public out of the brackets. Because you talked about the importance of sensual feeling, of your own feeling when encountering the object, and the whole metaphor of love making somehow puts the public in a quite passive voyeuristic, I would say, position. And then you mentioned that after this you still feel a need to share this experience with the public. Then you're right. So I'm curious, do you consider then your writing piece to be a translation or a kind of a reenactment of the same sensual feeling you get from the object in order to evoke the similar experience in the public?
The answer is no. What you described is more what I tried to answer to this other lady when I drew the parallel between the activity of the artist and the activity of the critic further, you see. But I don't understand when you say that the public is left as a voyeurist. I am the public. But who else? I cannot be in your skin.
You mentioned the reader as a public. You used the
word
that's reader.
When then there are a number of criteria. which are not those of the artist at all. For example, and more, the more I grow older, the more I want to be understood. And which means trying to be as simple as possible, trying not to use jargon, trying to use simple words, trying to use simple sentence constructions. I just don't get there. I'm still too complicated. I realize that I write things that people don't understand. Or that my friends, for example, the Voici book, that was a book that was meant for a general audience, no footnotes, simple stories, and all my friends who are not in the art world and did, read it because it was me, they told me, my God, it's difficult. And I thought I had done something very simple. But the endeavor to write simply, to write to be understood, is something that an artist does not necessarily have to do. You agree with me? I mean, I'm not an artist, I don't act like an artist. There is a little part of aesthetic decisions in writing. It's like writing is also an art form after all, right? Even if style in writing is also something that matters, even if you write theory. But it's a small ingredient, it's not the main thing. And then also the difference is that I am much less free than the artist. I think I would describe my job more as a scientific task. You don't want to say, you're not free to say just anything. You have to look for the truth, or whatever approximates the truth the best you can. If you do an interpretation, it's the same thing. You're not totally free to project. The artist is free, hopefully.
Hello. I wanted to ask you in relation to the talk. Throughout the talk, you mainly mentioned your dialogue and talk and connection to the object. And I was wondering, then you mentioned the dialogue with the artist, but very much at the end. So I was wondering, in this process with the artwork, if you sometimes reach the artist, how important is the connection to the artist itself, or if sometimes happens or not, or if it's quite detached from the work you're looking at, in a way, if it goes back to the death of the author, or how you relate to this. And also in relation to this, I wanted to ask you how important is for you the writings from the artist itself, that nowadays there's quite a lot sometimes. It's quite important sometimes for the artist, this writing.
It varies. There is no generality in this, in my own experience. I cannot talk for other people, I can only talk from my own experience. There's one thing I want to discard right away, is the thing about the death of the author. That is not an issue at all. When I say my rule is that I prefer to write as if the author was dead, it doesn't mean the death of the author as a theoretical issue à la Roland Barthes. It means as if the author could not talk back anymore. Because I really think that a good piece of art doesn't need the artist. It's the work that does the job. Michelangelo is no longer here. Velasquez, whom I saw 3 days ago, is no longer here. We can still...
I'm not talking about the speech of the artist. I'm talking about the artist as the maker and as the
Well, you did talk about the speech of the artist, nevertheless.
Afterwards, yeah.
Yeah. And writings of artists also. I think there is no rule. There is no rule. It varies from one artist to the next. I don't know. I really don't know. For example, there's Robert Smithson. He's a fantastic writer on art. I think his writings made me think a lot, gave me lots of food for thought. Much better than his work, actually. I think the work is not as good as the thinking that goes on in the art. Now, Smithson died too early. He was young. Maybe he would have developed into a fantastic artist later on. There are other artists. You take Mondrian's theories. You don't want to. you don't want to buy that. It's ridiculous. The theories of Mondrian are just ridiculous. Theosophy and all that schwärmerei, and his theory about sexual difference is the worst. If you have a little bit of feminist awareness today, and to reduce masculinity to the vertical and feminine to the horizontal is so ridiculous. But Mondrian is still one of the 5 greatest painters in the 20th century, in my opinion. So there's no rule about that. Take Joseph Kosuth. The best thing he ever produced was a text. A text that is wrong, theoretically, but still a very interesting theoretical text. So I'm afraid I cannot give you a general answer. The issue of the artist talking back, in my experience, it has always been difficult. I think that writing on living artists and not compromising on what you want to write always leads to a slight clash with the artist. It has happened to me many times. Like, not a clash, but a sort of pain. A sort of that the artist usually disagrees, and it's like we are going to meet, but we don't meet.
I have a question here.
Well, yeah, the question I hope is will become a question. My problem a bit is that I see so many different discourses going on at the same time, so I was just thinking, so like, how could I connect in a way of still trying to make sense with. I think that I did found the way that you produced your talk kind of developed from out of a very specific subject-object dichotomy, which is of course not how do you say that at this moment in our discourses, the more process-related discourses, is kind of how to say that it's not so common anymore, you know, especially in feminism and others, and that's also what she was talking about, of the agency of the object, you know. And so there are so many different things going on, and I heard him saying about this interest, this interest in between space. And there's one person that I have been thinking of, not talking about Duchamp, because that's, you know, an area I don't want to, you know, discuss with you. But actually, this is a formalist I'm thinking of. And actually, this of the beginning of the 20th century is Mikhail Bakhtin, and this is one of these figures that I find so interesting, because he actually tried to make exactly this link between the object and the beholder, the one that is the only one, the beholder, to be able to complete the object. And he would make a way in which he could kind of give this object, or the work of art actually, its agency without, because of the difference that he made between the materiality of the work and its aesthetics qualities. And I don't know whether Bakhtin is, you know, whether you use Bakhtin, because also he is a Russian formalist. Well, that's how he started.
If you're right,
that's how he started.
You're right about the shift between the author and the hero.
Yes.
That explicitly makes him not formalist. So
That's true, but it comes from formalism. No.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's true. No, you're right. Of course, that's why I like Bakhtin.
his whole biography is actually based on getting away from the center.
I know. He comes from there now. That's what I want to make a link to it. Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah.
Well, I am not too familiar with Bakhtin's work. I know a little bit about his comments on the Carnival and Rabelais and all that, and I also know a little bit about his concept of dialogism. So in looking back at what I've done here, I think this is every bit as dialogical as Bhakti.
Yeah,
It's very dialogical, this, no?
well, it keeps a very strict division between the subject and you and the object.
Well,
in that sense, it also keeps a quite an authoritative position, and it others the other. You know, it doesn't make it keeps othering the other. And I think that's, you know, Bakhtin is for me an example who does that pre-feminism. He's already making this link and trying to.
Why pre-feminism?
No, because it was, you know, it was.
Yeah, but what does that have? What does that have to do with feminism?
Because from also feminist theory, there has been, of course, a lot reworked into about subject-object relationships, and especially that difference or otherness is not so much being, you know, completely. You cannot take that or put that on others specifically, but it has a lot to do with relations and relationships, and so that, you know, yeah, differences as part of relations between people and not.
But I feel that's exactly what I'm dealing with here. The thing, I think the misunderstanding is that you are talking theoretically and I'm talking from experience, which means that subject-object, okay, you can pull dozens of eminent philosophers out of the closet who have challenged the object-subject relationship. So, but each of us in this room, we have a sense of self, and the sense that is an object. I'm sorry, you know, me and the object, and then me and you, and a certain otherness. It's so basic that I don't see. Maybe I don't get the sense
so
of your.
basic. It is a kind of logic, kind of thinking, and knowledge. We talk about knowledge, with which we look at the world. You know, that's which is being challenged at this moment, of course, a lot. Also because of our relationship with new technologies, there's been a lot of challenging going on about whether we are the only subjects or the only.
I'm not saying that we are the only subject. I'm saying I'm talking about basic things like feelings, for example. You can't deny that your feelings are yours. To deny that would be to. No human being can do that, because what you feel is what you feel, and it's subjective in the sense that it is yours, private. Or don't you agree with me?
It's complex. Of course, you know, we are kind of thinking about what you were saying.
And I'm also making clear for a strong subject, and you shouldn't shy away from them, because when you see things, they're things. But what I'm saying is that you should really acknowledge your desire to see, but this is just a thing which you see. You cannot.
No, I agree with that, but still, there's a.
I actually wanted to say that we running a bit late, but I still am very interested in one question. You made a side comment about contemporary philosophers who tend to use art as a terrain on which they can apply the theories, and very often it goes wrong. And we had a similar conversation here a number of times. But I'd like to ask about the reverse relationship. What's the relationship between contemporary art theory and contemporary philosophy? Because we all are reading contemporary philosophy, and I would like to know what your relation to those writings actually is.
Whose writings?
If contemporary philosophy, if you think, for example, of Agamben, Rancière, to name but two. I'm sorry.
I don't read them all to begin with. Agamben I find interesting for some things. Yeah, his notion of event, for example, and things like that. Badiou I find very interesting, but that's because he's crazy. That is his combination of Mallarmé, Mao Zedong, and Lacan is such an explosive bond. I find him very entertaining to read, and he's so excessive. Like his notion that the avant-garde pursued the passion of the real, and he's looking at the whole 20th century for that, is so excessive that it becomes really interesting and thought-provoking. Rancière doesn't interest me at all. I think that he may be a good. I think it's sort of on a general level. It looks constructed and interesting, but it's never based on specific knowledge of the art. Whenever he writes, I'm not talking about his social and political philosophy, which I don't know anyway, but whenever he talks about art, it's too vague. He does not have the everyday familiarity with art, whether contemporary or modern or ancient, for that matter.
And is it at all possible to, in one way or another, identify what the relationship between contemporary art theory and contemporary philosophy?
I mean, I will be very pretentious in my response. The only art theory I'm interested in is my own. It is my own endeavor. I'm working on an art theory, so I cannot be busy with commenting on other people's art theories, besides the fact that I find them all wrong. Of course, so I'm simply looking. I learn from other people's mistakes. I learn from their blind spots when it comes to theory. I learn from that. I had a debate with Arthur Danto last year. So it's like, Kant after Duchamp versus Hegel after Warhol.
Yeah.
It's two different philosophical worlds. So I really have immense admiration for Kant. I am studying Kant more and more and more and more, and I find more and more and more to richness in that work. And so, more and more I think that things went wrong with the romantic reception of Kant, and that Hegel is dangerous.
Which means that?
Which means
Danto is dangerous.
No, Danto is not dangerous.
Okay.
I can imagine this calls a long list of new questions into our minds. But I would, for now, like to thank you for wonderful insights you shared with us.
I really regret that I was alone at this table. I feel it's unfair, but
it is really well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
And with you, I'd like to renegotiate the agreement I made with you in the beginning. It's around 6 o'clock. I suggest we have a drink and dinner, and after that review the film of the Italian. Is that a good proposition? Thank you very much.